Welcome back to one of my videos. This is going to be the first of two videos about the what is an animal information. So what I'd like you to do is go to Google Classroom and open up the digital notebook. Just say what is an animal digital notebook. It's under the what is an animal topic. And we're going to just kind of familiarize ourselves with the notebook itself. And then we'll get started with some of the information. I'm hoping this is going to be about a 10-minute to 15-minute video. We'll see. So I'm actually going to set my timer. I'm going to start it right now. Make sure you turn off your phone and you have some space so that you can really think about this information instead of, jumping all around. Also, feel free to pause the video if you have to go and look at something on your digital notebook, or if you need to write something, type something out in the digital notebook, whatever. So usually I do a physical notebook and we number the pages and we put all of our dissection drawings in there, all of our notes in there, and we glue stuff in there, and it gets pretty full by the end of the year. This year I thought, well, we're gonna have virtual kids and have in-person kids, and we're gonna have both. So we need to do something a little bit different, a little bit more consistent for the entire year. So that's why we're doing the non-traditional digital notebook. If you prefer a notebook and you have a notebook at home, please feel free to write in your notebook. You can keep pages with us. The unit 1 is always bigger because there's just a lot of information in unit 1. So expect to use a little bit more paper than usual. All right, so if we open the digital notebook, when you open it, I think it opens about this size. Just go ahead and zoom in, and that's about the size that you're used to. And put your name in there. This is our first unit, what is an animal? You can see these slides are a little bit longer, kind of the size of a notebook. This is a link to the standards-based grading rubric that we went over last week. You can go ahead and make a copy and then put the what is an animal up here and kind of think about what you already know about it, and what level maybe you're at right now and what level you want to be at. I'm not going to actively collect these or assign these. That's just, it's for your information. I'm going to refer to it several times. So just know it's there. It'll be at the top of every digital notebook unit, but it's there for you to kind of self-evaluate and see what, your grades might mean. Then I'm going to have a table of contents. You will notice that our units are separated into learning targets, usually 2 or 3. And each learning target has an assessment with it, which is usually a project, okay? And you get some choice in what's your project, and we'll go over that in a different video. So this unit has actually 2 learning targets. These link to the page, the slide that they are on, and they also tell you the page number or slide number that it's on. We will be doing a gummy bear lab, and also the dichotomous key is actually along the lines of learning target 2, but I thought you might want to jump there when it's time. So let's go ahead and get started. You can see that when we have a new learning target, it's at the top. So this is, I can explain the characteristics of animals. And this digital notebook is going to go right along with the presentation. Okay, so some of the links that I wanted you to see are actually in the digital notebook because you will not have access to this presentation. So take a minute and pause and watch that video that is on, and I'm going to be jumping back and forth. Slide 3. It's a brief video, less than 10 minutes, about the types of animals. And then you're going to talk about how you would describe an animal. So what are some qualities that you would use to describe an animal? Go ahead and type that in. You can pause. Now we're going to talk about what are the qualities of an animal. What are the characteristics of an animal? So this is what all animals have, all these characteristics. They're all multicellular, which means they're more than one cell. So there are no one-celled animals. And those cells, if you remember in biology, if you had me, you talked about a pyramid where, atoms, a group of atoms is molecules, a group of molecules is an organic compound, a group of organic compounds is a cell, a group of cells is a tissue, and you went all the way up that. Well, animals all have specialized tissues, so groups of cells working together for a specific function. Eukaryote, they are all eukaryotes. You remember that from biology? Eukaryotes mean that they have a nucleus inside their cell. Heterotrophic. Heterotrophic means that they have to consume their food. So they're not autotrophic, which are the plants and some algae and bacteria. These are heterotrophics. They have to consume food in some way. Some animals have one opening in which they consume and expel, they consume food and expel waste in the same opening, and some have two. Most of them are sexually reproductive, but some of them, like sponges and some of the flatworms, they can actually bud or asexually reproduce, kind of that meiosis, mitosis unit you talked about. And most of them are mobile at some point. Actually, all of them are mobile at some point in their life. It means they move. Some are sessile as adults, and some are sessile as larvae. Sessile means they sit still. Okay, if you go to the next slide in your digital notebook, you'll see this is already there for you. It says animals can be described by, and then it's got 4 things: development, symmetry, support, and protection. So this is kind of the extent of this video. So we're going to go through these 4 things and then stop, and then the second video will be the evolution and taxonomy stuff. This video is in your digital notebook, so please watch it. It is longer. It's 10 or 11 minutes, and this guy is a little nutty, but he, you know, lots of enthusiasm. But you need to have some of the information in there, and will be repeated here, but please watch this video. So pause here, take a minute in your digital notebook and watch this 10 or 11 minute video. So the first way that animals can be described is by development. Okay, so there's 2 different ways that animals can develop. So let's talk about how they all start. They all start as an egg and a sperm fertilized. That fertilized egg is called a zygote. That zygote starts to undergo mitosis. So there's just cell division, cell division, cell division, cell division. And it's not hollow at first, but eventually it hollows out to form a blastula, which looks kind of like this. So I want you to kind of think of it like a balloon, okay, with that single layer of cells, okay? That balloon, if you imagine taking that balloon and taking your thumbs and kind of pushing in a hole, okay, that's what happens here, and we get this blastopore formed. So then we get these different layers, and we don't really talk about the layers too much, but the different layers, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, become different parts of the system. So like digestion and nervous system and all that stuff. But that blastopore is what we're looking for. So again, imagine the balloon, you've taken your thumbs and you've kind of pushed in a hole. That's the blastopore. There's 2 things that blastopore could become. The blastopore could become the mouth. And if it becomes the mouth, then that is a protostome type animal. And that's most invertebrates. So your insects, your worms, your sponges, most invertebrates are protostomes. If that blastopore becomes the anus, that's where waste is coming out, then it's known as a deuterostome. And that's most of the vertebrates and the starfish. Make sure that you've made those 2 distinctions in your digital notebook. Protostome, that hole that you made in the balloon, becomes the mouth. That's a protostome. If it becomes the anus, it's a deuterostome. Now that's important to indicate, because once we get into the evolution of it, you'll see the protostomes all develop first, and then your first deuterostome, that's a milestone in evolution. Okay, so the second way that animals can be described is by their symmetry. And symmetry is the arrangement of body parts. And except for the sponges, which is the first animals that we actually talk about, those sponges are asymmetrical. They have no symmetry. There is no arrangement. You cannot cut it in any plane to get an equal size, okay? The other animals are either, oops, I skipped one, radially symmetrical, which means you can take a plane and you can divide the animal in any which way, and it's always equal body halves. So think about the types of animals that exhibit radial symmetry. So think of something that's, you know, round like this sponge here, maybe a starfish, a sand dollar. Those are all radially symmetrical. Bilateral symmetry is if you can only cut the organism in half one way, and have them equal left and right. We are bilaterally symmetrical. All right. What other animals do you think, can you think of that are bilaterally symmetrical? An extra dash bothers me. I'm just going to take that out. Okay, so bilaterally symmetrical animals, and the dog is another example, they have certain terms to describe their structures. And that's where our lab is going to go. And don't stop yet for the lab, but that's where our lab is going to go. If you go back to your digital notebook here, back to the symmetry, you're going to see this video right here referenced. Okay, so that's where you're going to watch this video, and it's very short, and she goes over all the terms. There's also an activity here where you're going to drag, so you'll drag, for example, caudal, you'll drag that over to the tail of the fish. Okay, and the caudal down here, you'll drag that over to the end of the frog. So you're going to drag those into the correct position. So just pause here, watch the video, and drag everything where it needs to go. The other way that animals can be described is by their structure and support. So we have two broad categories: invertebrates, animals without backbones, and there's a bunch of examples there: insects, mollusks, arthropods, starfish, and then the vertebrates. And those are the animals with backbones, and those are the animals that you probably see a lot, like birds, frogs, fish. When you go outside, you probably hear the birds, you might see a snake. Those are all vertebrates. Invertebrates can have an exoskeleton or a hydroskeleton. If you look at this picture here, the exoskeleton, also think of insects when you think of exoskeleton, because it has that hard outer covering. And then a hydrostatic skeleton, things like worms, use water pressure, and that water pressure builds up inside their body and actually supports, it helps their body stay kind of inflated, if you think of it as a worm. And then vertebrates have this internal skeleton, this endoskeleton. What's important to note is that less complex animals like sponges, like worms, they have lower levels of cell organization, less body organization. They're usually radially or asymmetrically asymmetrical. There's little to no cephalization, which means there's not a lot of divisions, body divisions, and there's no cavities, no coelom or false cavity. And then the more complex animals, like the vertebrates, those have a higher level of cell system specialization, more internal body organization, bilateral symmetry. So you can see kind of the range, the spectrum. Less complex animals have less of all those things we just talked about, and more complex animals have more of those things. Okay, we're going to talk about the 7 basic functions of animals, and this is an important list. This list is basically what we talk about with every group of animals. So these are the 7 basic functions that animals do: feeding, respiration, circulation, excretion, response, movement, and reproduction. These 7 things all animals can do in some way, and they're different. You know, think about a sponge feeding versus us feeding. It's very different structures, very different functions. All right, so you're actually gonna, in your digital notebook, you're gonna take a pause here. Where are my 7 functions? And you're going to write down these 7 functions by creating a graphic organizer. And you can create charts up here, insert chart over here, or diagram even. Actually, I think that's what we're looking at. Yeah, the chart is something different. Insert diagram, and you can make some of these, any of these, you can just pick one, and create a graphic organizer of the 7 functions. And here you can see it's a pie chart, a flow chart, or other visual representation of the 7 functions. You can also see that it's time to complete a target. So I'm going to pause the video here. This is my first part, and then I'll have a second part to go for the rest of the slides. And we're going to, do a lab, and we're going to do a target. So stay tuned for more.